Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to another session. I am finally on summer break. Homeschooling is done. My schooling is done. Baby Sadie has arrived. And I have some really great episodes in queue for you guys that are going to drop throughout the summer and into the fall. I have finally had time to sit down and plan them out. And I know you're really going to love them because leading with our theme that we started a few episodes back of just leading our lives, our lifestyles, our choices, decisions, thoughts, actions, intentions with Jesus at the center, having that grace-led approach, having that heart posture for Christ, and being able to move forward from that space, that's really what we're coming back to. So I'm going to do a bit of a baby story update. Birth update. It's not going to be too long in this episode because I really want to get into the meat and potatoes of this, which is coming back to a space where you are not chasing, where you are not distracted, where you are living your life, attuning yourself to the expectations and standards of Christ. And not because we're ever personally expecting. I'm not personally expecting to be perfect in my walk with this, and I hope that you aren't too, but that we are always seeking and striving to do better, to be better, to understand that the standard that we are truly upheld to is perfection. And it's okay when we fall short because God knows we will fall short. He knows that we will sin. He knows that we have sinned, and He knows that we are currently in some different ways sinning, in some ways that you may not be aware of, which is actually what our next episode is going to be about, is really diving into the attunement of your awareness to the words of God. However, in this one, we're going to come back to having a graceful recovery. And my story of recovery is coming from postpartum, you might be going through something right now that you are recovering from. Maybe it's something to do with your health. Maybe it's something to do with your finances. Maybe it's something to do with a relationship. Maybe it's a loss. You've lost a loved one recently. There could be a plethora of things that you could be going through right now that's putting you in a season of recovery. And to live and to lead in that season from a space that is grounded, that is not distracted, that is rooted in Christ, is going to make everything else so much better and so much more meaningful and joyful, even when you're going through the growing pains and the genuine pains of whatever it is that you are facing. So, baby Sadie arrived on May 28th. At 6:30 p.m. I knew she was going to come early. All my last three babies, Clara, Noah, and now Sadie, came 2 weeks early, 2.5 weeks early. And I knew she was going to be early just because of how I was feeling and all the things. Eventually, you just get to this point where you just know. It's not just a hope. Oh, I hope that I go early. It's just like a knowing. And so for me, I'm so grateful that she was early because at that point I was super tapped out. Can you go put that in the garbage, please? Thank you. And I had a midwife throughout this experience, and I would never go any other route now doing it for 2 rounds. However, I don't plan on having any more children. So if it's in God's plan, then it shall be, but it is certainly not in mine. I think 5 children is more than enough. So I had my midwife. I checked in with her on the 28th. So when I had Noah, my water had broke on the top. So it wasn't testing with amniotic fluid. So they can do like a swab and it turns blue if it's amniotic fluid. So with Noah, I had that swab done and it wasn't turning blue. So it was like water from the top of my whatever it's called. I can't remember the word right now. Anyways, so the same thing had happened with Sadie. So I knew that when this water broke at 5 a.m, that the day was going to be today. With Noah, I had actually waited 3 days. So that caused some other issues, but in this case, that was not the case. So I was very grateful and blessed for that. So I go and get checked in at the hospital by 9:30, and I wasn't like having consistent contractions or anything. So my midwife said, just go and walk it out, see if anything progresses, and then come back later. And I'm like, okay, but like when my water breaks, I have like an hour, if that. Like in Clara's case and in Philip's case, when my water broke, the baby was literally coming out. So I am very apprehensive to leave the hospital when I am having contractions because it does go so quickly. She's like, okay, well, like there's a mall. You can go walk around the mall. So me and Phil go and have lunch. We're out of the hospital by about 11:30. We go and have lunch, and then we go walk around Kingsway Mall. I don't know if you live in Edmonton or have been to Kingsway Mall in Edmonton. It used to be like an okay mall, even though it wasn't like very flashy, like nothing was upgraded. The area is kind of sketchy just in general, but the mall was okay. Well, now it's like they put lipstick on a pig. They renovated this whole mall, but it is worse than ever before. And it is, so we're walking around and me and Phil are just so uncomfortable because there's people who are like passed out from drugs, just like in these nooks and crannies. He had to use the washroom, and there's like someone who's like passed out in one of the stalls. One of the other stalls is flooding. One of the other stalls is full of like literal overflowing shit. So he's like, absolutely not. There's like, I wanted to get an ice cap, and there's this lady who just comes barreling past me and starts yelling at the cashier because she needs a bottle of water, and starts telling her she needs to get more tables and chairs so that she can have somewhere to sit. And it's just like the wildest experience. And so we decide this mall is not for us. So we go to a couple other places and we head back home. And by 4:30 at home, my water broke. And then I was at the hospital by 5. And then Mommy's just doing something, okay?
Oh, do you know that Philip has another pup?
Yes, I do, yeah.
Can I have one?
Sure. So by 5 o'clock, I get to the hospital. By 5:30, I'm checked into a room. By 6:30, she has arrived. So like it all went very fast. As soon as my water broke, she was out within an hour and a half, or 2 hours, within 2 hours. And that was a wild experience. I did it 100% med free. And I would honestly recommend that to anyone who is having a baby. Obviously, if you have to have a C-section, it's a different story. But things like epidurals actually delay your progress. So if you go into the hospital and your plan and your capability is to deliver naturally and you get an epidural, you're going to actually delay your process. It slows down your oxytocin, as well as it can often, and is often the case why women tear, because you can't feel your body. So you're not pushing when you're naturally responding to push, right? Like your body is contracting, it's got its own waves. And if half of your body is drugged up and you can't fully feel what's happening, then you're just kind of going off of someone else's direction or your own direction, and you're not going with the natural process of your body. So I'm grateful that I didn't tear in any of my cases. I've never had an epidural. With Philip, Noah, and Clara, I had a shot of morphine at the beginning of labor because I am hypercontractive when it like kicks in. My contractions are every 30 seconds or every minute without relief. And then this time I didn't do the morphine, and I didn't do the saline. So I didn't get hooked up to an IV. I was doing some research before this delivery and found out that when we get saline, it actually can inflame the baby. Not that it's necessarily like a risk. However, I wanted this to be as natural and as seamless as possible. So I wasn't super inflamed after delivering her. I wasn't super delayed in my responses with recovery because I didn't have meds that I had, or morphine that I had to basically withdraw off of or wean off of, or my body had to recover from. And so when we take these medications as well, especially epidurals, we can go through the process of having a lot of inflammation, and it also delays your recovery process hormonally because now your body's fighting against like drugs, right? So of course there is an up and down to everything, but you have to remember, like, God built us to be able to do this. And obviously there's circumstances where medication is absolutely warranted. And yes, I totally fully understand and can appreciate that every woman has a different pain threshold, but we're all still built to be able to do that. And women have been delivering babies since the beginning of time. And it wasn't until the last 80, 90 years that pain medication actually became available for us. So we have to remember that, right? So we can say, oh, I don't have as much of a pain tolerance. And I'm not shaming anyone or being passive aggressive towards anyone who may have opted for that therapy. But do remember that you were built for it, and it is temporary, right? So in my case, I'm very grateful because my labors are very short. And I know that there are other women who have had long labors, 10, 12, 15 hours in labor, and have done it without medication, right? Like, we truly can do it. And so if you do choose to take the medication, that's also okay. But I think that we have a due diligence that we really should be more aware of. And that is doing the research and just figuring out what the actual effects are during and post when it comes to receiving these medications and what the statistics are. I always opted out of an epidural primarily because I found out that there's a higher risk of having complications with an epidural in terms of it nicking something in your spine and it causing a plethora of other issues. And so from that, I just always opted out of epidural. And again, you can totally get it if you want it. I'm not shaming anyone or putting anyone off who does want it, chooses to get it, who has gotten it. But I do think we need to do our due diligence like everything else, right? Like everything else. Why are we blindly trusting the experts at this point? Especially when it's like a general OB. They're literally following a process that they have been conditioned to follow. And if you haven't noticed in your experience, there's not a lot of, let me inform you of the pros and cons of this. Let me share with you the other options that are available for you. And when I had an OB with Philip and that was my experience, I wanted nothing to do with that going into my next, 3 pregnancies. So midwife was my favorite route to go by far because there is, and again, not every doctor is terrible and not every midwife is amazing. I really lucked out with mine. I have to say my midwife I had with Noah was by far hands down my favorite. And that was because she actually was very much like, hey, so we're going to have a conversation about this is what's kind of expected at this stage or what's recommended at the stage. And here's the pros and cons of everything. And here's your alternatives. And I absolutely love that. And it really pushed me to do more research. And then with Sadie, it was kind of just figuring out some of those final things like the IV. Do I actually need this? What's the benefits? What's the cons to this? And just things like that. So my midwife, the second time wasn't as information based. She was more of like the go with the process from a midwife standard. However, she was still exactly what I needed throughout the whole experience. So Sadie arrived. We got to go home 2 hours later. And now she's just the bundle of joy. She's going to be featured in this episode. I'm sure you'll hear her squeaks and her little noises, right? She is seriously the cutest. I always say to Phil, I'm like, are you sure we're done? We make really cute kids. However, I do feel like we need to move on from this chapter in our life. I love all my babies, and we only have one open seat in our vehicle before we need a new one. So I don't really want to invest in a new vehicle. All right. So she has been wonderful. My recovery, which is what we're going to get into in this episode, has been so much more grace-led than any of my other ones. So with Philip, I really didn't have any recovery. I pretty much snapped back to, in terms of mobility, in terms of, I didn't have any abdominal separation. I wasn't in pain for very long. I didn't bleed for more than 2 weeks. Honestly, I feel like that's even like a stretch. It was super, super minimal with everything. And then with Clara, I had a little bit more pelvic floor issues, not very much abdominal separation. It was healable. I don't know if that's an actual word. I was able to heal my abdominal separation. With Noah, I had extreme mobility issues pretty much for 6+ months. It caused me a lot of problems in terms of lower back strength. Or lack thereof. I had severe abdominal separation to the point of being able to qualify for surgery, but I knew that I was going to have another baby at some point, so I wasn't going to opt for recovery surgery, basically, than to just go and have another child and separate them again. So what's happening? So now with Sadie, I am way more diligent with binding, postpartum binding, like the binding belts. I do have pretty severe abdominal separation. I have a hard time sitting up from laying down. I have a hard time standing up from sitting up. There is a lot of pelvic floor, lower abdominal strength issues that I am facing. And so it's really like one step at a time. And this is something where if I had these issues with when I had Philip 8 years ago, I would be in such a state of despair. One, I didn't have Jesus. And two, I had so much more expectations back then of what recovery should look like. Like it's this like snapback. And this is such a toxic mentality that I honestly really do truly believe that all women who have children face. One, pregnancy and postpartum will bring out all of your insecurities. If nobody has told you that yet, prepare yourself with Jesus, prepare to capture your thoughts and hold them up to Christ, because that will be your only saving grace. And I share that with you because I am constantly reminded that we cannot do this life alone. Right? Like when I get into the next episode about attuning your awareness to Christ, it's so evident that when we just rely on ourselves to quote unquote fix our problems or heal, which is still impossible to do on our own, or to expect to have discernment, right? That we will fall short even faster and for much longer every single time. But when we allow ourselves to take our thoughts captive, we can lead and live from this state of gentleness that God offers us through his word, that Jesus talks about in his plans. And this is so important because in my case, it's my recovery postpartum. In your case, it might be something like grief, financial strain, a health thing, life situation, a transition, a job loss, all different types of problems. And you might be going through that recovery. And in order to have that gentleness, in order to be able to have that grace over yourself, and to even go as far as to have joy through the process, even when there is suffering, it is so unbelievably important to recognize that if not chasing Jesus, you will be distracted and you will be chasing situations and circumstances and ideas of where you think you should be or what you think you should be doing that is not going to serve you, and that really truly is the enemy attacking you. And I have found myself so often in this postpartum, and I'm so grateful for Jesus, because in those moments where I feel like, oh, I'm supposed to look a certain way, I'm supposed to be doing something else, I'm supposed to be more mobile, I'm not supposed to be feeling this pain, I should be able... Oh, it's okay. Hold on. We're gonna nurse and do this episode. There we go. All better. I should be able to fill in the blank. I have been able to take captive my thoughts relatively quickly, not always, but more often than not, to bring me back to what's important. And that's being present with my kids, actually just laying in bed and resting, allowing myself to heal with Sadie, and not making this a huge to-do with everything else. 2 Corinthians 10:5 says, let me find it. Actually, we're going to start at 3. For though we walk in flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ, and being ready to punish all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. So that's 3:2-6, 10 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians chapter 10. There we go. So I share that with you because this one, Paul lays out so clearly that what often sends us into a state of disparity, into poverty, into false righteousness is this idea that we have to live according to our own goals, our own ideals, our own appearances, our own fill in the blank of whatever you think you're supposed to create, where you're supposed to be, what other people may expect of you. And it's not until we really put ourselves in that state to take captive our thoughts and to uphold them to the Word of God, and to ask ourselves, is what I'm doing and what I'm thinking and what I'm expecting what God has planned for me? And when we go to Matthew and we talk about this idea of gentleness, and we talk about this application of gentleness in the journey of recovery. Sorry, I'm trying to do this while burping a baby and flipping pages in the Bible. We're going to just do it all. I go to Matthew chapter 11, verse 29. And actually, this whole little paragraph from 25 to 30 is Jesus gives true rest. And I'd really recommend and encourage you to go and read that whole passage. But I'm going to take just the end of this and share that with you. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. So take his word, take his grace, take his wisdom upon you. Combine yourself with him and learn from him. For I am gentle and lowly in heart, meaning humbled, and you will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light, right? Jesus paid the price for our sins. He took the burdens of the world for you and everyone who has come and everyone who will come upon his shoulders. He did that so that we can let go of the things that our own expectations, others, the expectation we think others have of us, or that they may have spoken or portrayed for you, right? Taking all of that and recognizing that none of it actually matters. And though you know that, and though I know that in this season of recovery, it doesn't mean that we're going to not get trapped in this mindset of what we think we need to do and where we're supposed to be and so on and so forth, right? Like in this process of recovering, I'm going to try and do this without crying. My grandma also passed away. And so I'm recovering in postpartum and I'm going through stages of grief, and it's challenging because you have to live your life and you got to move on and you have goals and plans and all the things, right? And you're trying to do it in a way that's not from a state of always suffering, right? Anytime you're growing through something, anytime you're transitioning through something, there is uncomfortable parts to that. There is a space that you need to go through that is painful and suffrage, because that's what challenges you. That's what stretches you. That's what shows you what you are capable of. That's where you go through something you've never gone through before. Like, even though I've gone through grief before with the loss of others in my life, it's not the same as going through grief in this season of my life with the children I have and the lifestyle I live and the mindset I have and all those kinds of things, right? And so the same is going to apply for you. Even if you've recovered from something similar before, you've done something before, that doesn't mean that it's going to be the same when you go through it now. And so just reminding yourself of that and reminding yourself of the value of forgiving yourself for chasing things of the world and being held down by expectations and burdens that you shouldn't be, but yet here you are facing them yet again. And just give yourself that grace and that space to recognize, okay, yeah, this is what I'm doing. That's what's happened. That's what I've been facing, right? Like the spiritual warfare that I face with how my image is supposed to look or my recovery is supposed to look or going through grief is supposed to look. Yeah, there are times where I'm like, it shouldn't be like this, or it should be like this. And why is it not like this? And why is it like this? And just recognizing, okay, you know what? God, please forgive me for my focus is not on you and it's on something worldly and something that's not the presence of what you have gifted me now. Like you have to come back to the simplest fact that where you are right now, your present reality is a gift. Like you are living, you have another breath, another moment, another day, maybe another week, month, year, where you can make the changes, where you can work on obedience and discipline and you can live more gracefully and you can, do all these things. Whereas there is someone in the world who can't, and primarily because they don't live anymore, right? They've gone to heaven or hell, and you're here with the blessing and the gift of life, and you get to choose to live it for the kingdom, choose to live it for Jesus, and let all other things follow from that space. So coming back to the Bible and just allowing yourself to get into the word really humbles you, and being reminded that there's a gentleness that we are called to live by, to abide in. And from that space, taking captive our thoughts, like Paul says in Corinthians, and allowing ourselves to just move forward from that space. Now, with that, we still get to have discipline and discernment. And so as I come into this state, yes, having gentleness surrounding like, okay, maybe I don't push myself as much as I wanted to. Yesterday, I did a 45-minute, 3.5 incline walk on the treadmill and a little bit of light weights. And that was way too much for me. And I felt that for sure. Okay, so I found a limitation. Now today, instead of just saying, oh, you know what, I'm going to give it a few more weeks, I did 20 minutes this time. I did the same incline and I didn't do any extra weights. And I just allowed myself to be and let that be okay. And I had a little bit of pain. It wasn't not nearly as much as the day before. And I was proud of myself. I went 2 days in a row. We'll see how I'm feeling tomorrow. Maybe we'll do a third in a row and we're going to just keep building on that. But I get to be present with today. I get to be proud of what I did today. I get to recognize that I didn't push myself beyond a limit today and that I'm still leading from a space of discipline, right? Like movement is so important for your mental health in general. It's so important for your physical health, because it allows your body to literally move. It allows your mind to decompress, right? When you move your body, you release cortisol, and cortisol is what keeps your body in a state of hyperreaction, fight and flight, the inability to digest properly, the inability to detox properly, getting trapped in your thoughts. That all comes from, honestly, a lack of movement. So take the time to pick a goal for yourself that whatever season you're in, find your limitation and then just slowly work away at it. So for me, movement is really important. Also, better eating. So tonight we're having pizza for dinner, right? But the majority of the day I was eating healthy, high proteins, no carbs, tons of vegetables, lots of water. So I'm not going to feel guilty, and I'm not going to allow myself to feel guilty about choosing to have pizza for dinner. Right? Another thing I'm doing this season of recovery is testing. I'm going to do a whole health episode on this. But instead of guessing what allopathic approach, person, diet, supplements, all the things that everybody says you need, I'm actually going to go get tested and figure out what it is that I need so that I can recover properly. And I would really encourage you to do that too. And lastly, in this episode, community. Taking the time to spend more time in community with people who are following Jesus, with friendships that really truly matter and mean something to me. Because when we are in community, we are more accountable. We have less of an opportunity, most importantly, and especially when they're healthy relationships, when they're Jesus-led and inspired relationships, where you're not going to be complaining as much and you're going to be more dedicated and disciplined to your focuses, where you are going to be more where you are going to desire to stick with your plan, where you're going to have the ability to decompress. There's this whole notion out there that women have been separated from community. And honestly, what separates women from community is me, choosing not to put ourselves out there and to isolate, right? Community is actually all around. And we have the ability to be a part of it and to surround ourselves in it. But you have to be willing to do that. You have to get out of your own way and you're out of your own head and stop complaining that there isn't community and start getting into community and being consistent with it. And I did that for so long where I complained about, I don't really have a lot of friends, or I don't really have a lot of this, or I don't really have a lot of people around me. And it's like, I also wasn't making the effort to go and be in the presence of people, right? And so even if you're in a new space or place where you don't know a lot of people in person, go to your local church. Start, find one that speaks to you. Get involved with the projects and the different things that they're doing. Churches are always looking for volunteers, and it's a great way to meet like-minded people. Is everyone going to be perfect? No, but guess what? Neither are you. And when you humble yourself to that, it's so much more powerful, and you have this ability to just really meet people where they're at so that you can also be met where you're at without some chip on your shoulder or some kind of mirage that you're holding up. So as we get into this last one, there is there's one scripture that really stands out for me, and that's 1 Corinthians 9:27. And this one says, "But I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified." And this is so powerful when Paul speaks to the Corinthians about this, because what he's speaking to is the value and importance of being disciplined in your body, of truly, like an athlete, training and keeping your health, but also being reminded that if you're so quick to preach what everyone else should be doing, but you are not doing it yourself, then you may be disqualified. And I think a lot of us need to hear that and be humbled by that, because I know personally, I definitely was. Another one to really sit with is Ecclesiastes. So we're gonna go to it together. Hi, Beepos.
Hi, Mommy.
Hi, buddy. Oh no, the pizza's here.
What?
Mommy's almost done, and then I'll come have pizza with you. All right. We have Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 to 12. So, the value of a friend, the power of community. 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, and he has no one to help him up. Again, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, 2 can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. So it's just this is such a beautiful verse because it was really just speaking to, once again, the value and the power of community. And so often we take ourselves out of that because we are ashamed, or we have not enough time, or too much on our plate, or all the things. We were once hurt by community or friendships or whatever the case may be, or churches. And so we just discredit the whole situation as if, hey, that was too much for me and I got to recover from that. But it's like the only way to really recover is to get back out at it and try again, right? If you fail at weight loss, you get up the next day and you try again. Same financial struggles, all the things, health, relationships, you get back up and you try again. And if we don't allow ourselves to lead from this space, from being centered in Christ to picking goals and leading with intentions that are focused around Jesus, but also around moving forward, then we just stay stuck and stagnant. And in this season of recovery, it's just as much about the gentleness and the slowness and the presence as it is picking things that are relative and to your recovery journey. So I'm going to leave this here. I got a few other ones that are kind of going to go around some of these things that we talked about today. But I hope this episode helped you. I'd love to hear your feedback. Feel free to send me a message on Instagram @_SheIsRestored or @SheIsRestoredPodcast. And let me know what your takeaway was. And if there's anything that you're facing right now that you need prayers or you need support with, or a shoulder to lean on, or even if there was something in this episode that pointed you in the right direction, I would love to hear from you, support you, love on you, and pray over you in any way that I can. All right, until the next one, I hope you have a wonderful day.